A Viking longship was fast, flexible, and terrifyingly exposed. There was no warm cabin waiting below deck, no stove humming beside the crew, and no dry bunk where a soaked sailor could disappear for the night. You sat close to the water while spray came over the side, wind cut through damp clothing, and darkness slowly removed the horizon. So the real mystery is not how Vikings stayed comfortable at sea. They usually did not. The real achievement was staying functional long enough to reach shelter, land, or better weather. Their answer was a system built from timing, clothing, food, labor, teamwork, and experience. First, Vikings tried to avoid the worst conditions before the voyage even began. Long-distance sailing was generally concentrated in the safer part of the year because northern winters brought short days, violent storms, colder water, and in some regions, sea ice. That does not mean summer was gentle. The North Atlantic can be cold, wet, foggy, and dangerous even in good months. But choosing when to leave still mattered. The best defense against freezing weather was often not being offshore when the worst weather arrived. This mattered because the ship itself offered almost no permanent shelter. Longships were designed for speed, rowing, shallow water, beach landings, and rapid movement. A fixed roof would interfere with sails, oars, cargo, visibility, and fighting. Sailors lived inside the weather. That made clothing the first real barrier between the body and the sea. Wool was the key material. Wool fibers naturally trap small pockets of air, which slows heat loss. But the famous claim that wool keeps you warm when wet needs caution. Soaked wool becomes heavy, loses trapped air, and cannot protect a sailor forever against wind and icy spray. In cold water environments, that margin matters. A likely clothing system used layers, a linen underlayer where available, wool tunics and leg coverings, then additional wool garments, cloaks, or other outer layers. The important principle was flexibility. A man pulling an oar could become dangerously hot, while the man resting beside him could be shivering. Layers could be opened, removed, tightened, or added as work changed. This also reduced another danger: sweat. Overdressing during hard rowing could soak clothing from the inside. Once the work stopped, that moisture became a liability. A skilled sailor had to manage clothing before discomfort became crisis. Dense outer wool mattered too. Tightly woven and fulled cloth blocked more wind and delayed spray from soaking through. Leather shoes, animal skins, blankets, hoods, mittens, socks, and foot wrappings added protection. Extremities were especially vulnerable because the body protects its core by reducing blood flow near the skin. Wet feet could quickly become a serious problem. Spray, rain, bilge water, and constant bailing meant a ship's floor was not reliably dry. The hull itself provided limited protection. Crewmen could sit lower behind the planks, use cargo or equipment as partial wind barriers, and huddle together when they were off duty. The simplest heat source aboard was other people. A packed crew constantly produced body heat. Men sitting close together under wool lost less heat than isolated sailors standing in the wind. It was not enough to save someone in soaked clothing, but with reasonably dry layers and some wind protection, shared warmth helped. Work produced even more heat. Rowing, bailing, hauling lines, steering, raising the mast, trimming the sail, and shifting weight all required energy. Muscle turns food into movement and heat. During hard rowing, overheating could become the immediate problem. Then the shift ended. The sailor stopped moving. Wind crossed damp clothing, and cold returned quickly. That is why watches and crew organization mattered. A ship could not exhaust everyone at once. Part of the crew worked while others rested, ate, repaired gear, bailed, or tried to sleep. Sleep was dangerous because heat production fell and awareness disappeared. People probably rested wherever the vessel allowed, on boards, near cargo, across stored equipment, or in the driest available space. Dry bedding therefore became valuable cargo. A dry blanket could preserve body heat. A soaked blanket could become extra weight. Temporary shelter helped when conditions permitted. Crews could beach the ship, lower sail, rig cloth, or camp on land. Shelter was useful only when the ship remained controllable. This is one reason getting ashore was not a failure of seamanship. It was part of seamanship. Viking ships had shallow drafts and could approach beaches and rivers that deeper vessels could not. A crew could pull the vessel onto land, make camp, light a fire, repair damage, collect water, cook, dry clothing, and sleep without the deck rolling beneath them. Land also solved the problem people usually expect to solve with a fire aboard the ship, but routine open cooking at sea created obvious dangers. The hull was wood. Ropes and sailcloth could burn. Waves could scatter coals. Smoke blinded people. And a hot pot could become a projectile. Evidence for normal Viking shipboard cooking is limited. Preserved cold food at sea and hot meals ashore make far more practical sense. The safest Viking stove was often the beach. Once on land, crews could warm themselves, cook, dry garments carefully, and recover. Food mattered because body heat is metabolic. A sailor who was wet, exhausted, and underfed lost the ability to produce heat exactly when he needed it most. Provisions had to survive without refrigeration. Dried or salted fish, preserved meat, bread, grain foods, butter, cheese, and sour milk could provide fat, protein, and carbohydrate. Calories were survival equipment. Fat was especially useful because it carries more energy per unit of weight. Alcohol was not a reliable solution. Ale could provide fluid and calories, but alcohol can widen blood vessels near the skin, creating a warm sensation while increasing heat loss. Fresh water remained essential for performance and temperature regulation. Weather knowledge connected every other defense. Good clothing could not compensate for reckless navigation. Experienced sailors read wind, cloud, waves, currents, birds, visibility, coastline, and the behavior of the ship. They knew when to shorten sail, delay departure, seek shelter, or turn toward land. A veteran captain saying they were not leaving that day could save more lives than another layer of wool. Even then, things went wrong. Storms strengthened, sails tore, masts failed, hulls leaked, and ships drifted away from their route. Falling into near-freezing seawater was especially dangerous because water removes heat far faster than air. Heavy clothing and equipment made swimming harder. There were no radios, rescue aircraft, or modern immersion suits. Survival depended on staying aboard, reacting immediately, and having crewmates close enough to help. This is the part heroic stories often hide. Viking ships made dangerous journeys possible. They did not make them safe. Reconstructed voyages expose modern crews to cold, exhaustion, seasickness, poor sleep, and constant wetness, even with modern support nearby. Remove forecasts, satellite navigation, emergency beacons, and modern protective gear. And the achievement becomes more impressive, but also more costly. Not every crew arrived. Shipwrecks erase stories as easily as they erase equipment. Historical memory naturally preserves more successful voyages than failed ones. So there was never one trick for staying warm. Wool trapped air. Dense layers slowed wind. Hats, mittens, socks, and shoes protected vulnerable body parts. Dry storage preserved bedding. Rowing generated heat. Watches balanced work with recovery. Food powered metabolism. Companions shared warmth. Temporary shelters helped when wind allowed. Beach landings made fire, cooking, repairs, and drying possible. And seasonal judgment kept many sailors away from the worst conditions. Each defense was incomplete. Together they formed a survival system. And that system began before the ship touched water. Sheep had to be raised. Wool cleaned, spun, woven, and sewn. Food preserved. Water stored. Ropes, tools, chests, spare parts, and bedding prepared. The vessel inspected. The crew trained. Months of quiet labor made the dramatic voyage possible. That may be the most useful way to understand Viking toughness. It was not the ability to ignore cold. It was the discipline to organize around it. A numb, confused, or exhausted sailor was not proving bravery. He was becoming dangerous to everyone depending on him. Warmth was collective. One man rowed while another rested. One bailed while another steered. Someone protected dry gear. Someone watched the coast. Someone decided when to turn back. The lone hero at the prow is a modern fantasy. The sea rewarded organized crews. When they finally reached land, they may have been cold, salt-stiffened, bruised, sleepless, and smelling strongly of wet wool, but they could drag the ship above the tide, raise shelter, light a fire, cook, dry clothing, inspect the hull, and prepare to do it again. Later stories turned misery into courage and fear into destiny. But the sailor beneath two blankets was still a Viking. So, Vikings did not stay comfortably warm on freezing ships. They stayed warm enough by delaying exposure, protecting dry layers, working, eating, sharing shelter, choosing seasons carefully, reading weather, and reaching land before cold turned misery into incapacity. Their ships did not conquer the northern climate. Their entire culture learned how to negotiate with it. The wool came from farms. The sail came from immense textile labor. The route came from accumulated memory. The heat came from food, muscle, and nearby human bodies. And safety often came from knowing when the ocean had already won. Survival inside that open hull was not one fearless warrior staring into the distance. It was layers, work, preparation, and a tired crew keeping one another alive.